this episode, we head to the 16th century. And there we'll meet Bates and Miranda from Duration Brewing in West Acre, England. The South Carolinian and Londoner have taken this ancient, run-down yet protected barn and given it a new lease on life as a farmhouse brewery. The path has been long and hard, but it will go down in history. Welcome to No Pants During the Pandemic. Hi, I'm Kevin Brooks, and this is No Pants During the Pandemic. Today I'm speaking with Miranda Hudson and Derek Bates of Duration Brewing Company in the United Kingdom. Hey guys, how you doing today?
Hey there. Yeah, we're doing pretty good. It's a nice sunny Saturday here in Norfolk, and we are just having some downtime.
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
For American viewers who might not be familiar with who you guys are, tell me a little bit about Duration.
Sure. So Duration is a farmhouse brewery. We're very new. We just opened in November 2019, and our first beers rolled off the line in a launch in about December.
And while you're at it, tell me a little bit about yourselves too.
I'm Miranda. I'm a Londoner. I've spent a lot of my time being a freelancer working with creatives. I did a theatre studies degree and worked in costumes, photography, with architects, and also helped International Women's Charity.
And I'm Bates. I'm originally from South Carolina. Lived over here for about 10 years now. Started out in a small brew pub as my first sort of job. Then just never left. Always stayed in either restaurants or breweries or brew pubs.
When I met you, you were chefing, weren't you?
Yeah, because if you ever sort of move to a new place, it's always a bit harder to get a brewing job, but it's always easy to pick up a cooking job. So often I would cook until I could find a brewing job. Or sort of what happened when I moved over here is there were 3 breweries in London at the time 10 years ago, and 2 of those were Fuller's and Truman, and I think Meantime. That were the only 3 breweries in the whole of London. Now there's like 130. So it took a few years for it to catch on. So got back into brewing in about 2014.
Bates loves what gets brought to the table, whether that's food or drink. And I love the interaction with people and, connecting that story of what that offering is out to people.
Bates, how does a kid from South Carolina wind up in London?
We actually met at a mutual friend's wedding in South Carolina, in Charleston, and I was looking to travel. I'd kind of saved up a bit of money, been at the job I was cooking at, like a high-end restaurant in South Carolina at the time, and we met, and she was going back in 3 or 4 weeks. So
yeah, I've been on a world trip, and I was at the end of it visiting a friend, and she had a wedding that her and her husband were going to that evening, and Bates happened to be there, and Bates lied to me and said he'd take me on the dance floor. Which he did, hasn't done since. And then he followed me home. I think he was looking for his next adventure and came on over to visit.
yeah, that's it.
And who'd you work for once you got to England?
I did work for Brewdog, and then I worked for Brew by Numbers and became the head brewer there and worked a little over 2 years.
It seems like you guys had comfortable lives and good jobs. How'd you come to the decision to drop all of that and start on this adventure?
I mean, I just always kind of wanted to run my own thing and have my own voice of what I thought was missing in the UK sort of beer world. So it wasn't so much dropping for me, it's just shifting sideways. I was already brewing, I was already running a brewery. It's just now I have to be in all aspects of the not so glamorous side. Whereas where I just brewed before, I just showed up, did a brew schedule, made beers every single day. Now I have to do things like payroll and PAYE and book the trash collection and all that sort of stuff.
It's like one step in front of the other. Like, I think if we went back 3 years ago to when we were thinking of it, I think there's quite a lot of naivety. And if someone said, right, you're going to have to cover bats, you're going to have to cover water treatment, you're going to have to cover planners, you're going to have to raise a stupid amount of money, you're then going to have to navigate logistics. Oh, and then your country's going to want to leave the EU, and then there's going to be this world pandemic. I would have been like, oh no, too much hard work. But if it's just, you're just looking this far ahead and you have this drive that you want to make something happen, then you just do it. And then when you get to this point, you're like, well, we may as well do another step. And I think it happened like that.
To me, it's just like, I don't know, I've always been of the mindset, if you don't have anything to say, just don't say anything. So if we were just going to come in and be another drop in the bucket, dime a dozen sort of beer and brewery, then what's the point of that?
And so a brewery is born. Why the name Duration?
To me, duration's tempo. So it's timing and it's history and it's distance. You probably see it more like a philosophy, right?
It's a very encompassing, can be said in one word. It's got a lot of meanings to me, with the fact of everybody, as soon as you say that word, it means a million things to
So it's not prescriptive, it's just a word that is comprehended, but people put their own meaning in.
Yeah, so it can mean time, it can mean the distance between 2 points, it can mean just things like the space between 2 beats in a song. It can mean the duration of your life, and also it's really recognizable in lots of different languages. It's pretty close to the same word.
Henri Bergson had a theory called Elan Vital. What does that translate to?
Life force.
Yeah, that pertains that every living thing strives to reinvent itself in order to remain relevant.
He was actually like a biologist and scientist, and got into philosophy, and was actually scoffed at kind of in the 20s of the fact that, like, you can't put philosophy in science. You know, there's no life force. There's nothing driving something. It's slightly predetermined, and it's just evolution, and it's just biology. So what he said is basically every living thing exerts force to change and evolve and to find its place in its surroundings and change to those surroundings. And what he called it was a life force, and Elan Vital.
So it's like the ability to adapt.
And then fast forward now, and a lot of modern physicists actually cite him and that sort of thing, that, yeah, it's not science, but there's just so much shit we don't know about in the universe and in microbiology and like the human genome, and actually the stuff that we're learning about how the bacteria in your body actually dictates loads of things. So it's keeping that bit of magic in science.
But science is magic, isn't it? I mean, it's magic until it's understood, and then it's logic, but the two aren't mutually exclusive.
Yeah, so in the short, it just means that it's just like creation. Always creating and always being curious.
And that creativity and curiosity ties right into duration.
And then when we started thinking about duration, I guess we wanted somewhere close to London, because that's where our base was, and family. But we wanted to really connect beer back to the field and the agricultural aspect of it. We thought if we want to do a farmhouse model, then it makes sense to be right in it.
And by right in it, you mean the country. So the plan was to get out of London. What are the pros and cons of being in the city?
From a business aspect of it is just space and just being another cog in the wheel, which is good because you have a captive audience there all the time. We have no aspirations of getting huge or anything, but like the square footage in the London sort of city would just eat you alive on the baseline cost before you even started producing.
I think there's a really nice community in London, and we know a lot of the brewers there, and there's a nice sort of sense that everyone supports everyone, but at the same time, could it get too crowded? So we were thinking maybe we want to draw our inspiration from nature and from the outside, and still have a connection to our brewing buddies, but not be right in the thick of it.
Was Norfolk your first choice, or did you just want to be somewhere rural?
We looked kind of 2 places. It was mainly out west country, so going out towards not necessarily Bristol, but that kind of area. or looking in Norfolk, just because both of them have a lot of countryside, plus a lot of tie to the whole agriculture thing.
What's it like there?
Norfolk, which is on the east coast in the southern part of England, and it's very agricultural. There's a lot of woodlands, there's a lot of history here. It's a very flat terrain near the coast, and a lot of barley grows here.
If you've ever had any Simpson's malt, crisp malt, basically any malt in the country, it's pretty much made here. Quite a lot of it's on the farm here. So it is sort of the breadbasket for the UK.
Sounds idyllic.
It's got a lot of the things we want. Had the big old buildings, had a receptive sort of audience. It's a big beer drinking culture around here. Hour and a half train to London, 2.5 hour drive. Not really that far at all. Lots of beaches, so there's a real ebb and flow of people here. There's people that live here all the time, but from say April to October, it's heaving on the beaches because it's some of the nicest beaches in the UK. And it's also kind of a joke in the UK. It's on the way to nowhere. It's the only part in the UK that doesn't have any major motorways, highways, sort of stuff. People are just kind of bedded down here. They do their own thing, kind of march to their own drum, so it fit in really well.
You kind of connect it to the south a little bit, don't you?
Reminds me a lot of Charleston, kind of the low country of South Carolina. Looks a lot like that. Big tall pines, beaches, food, drink, all that sort of stuff.
Life moves at a lot slower pace, but yet they're fully connected to where they are, and they like to, they put a lot of value in a local source kind of produce.
You eventually found a location in West Acre. Can you describe the town for me, and how have the locals been reacting to your arrival?
Well, I think town's a stretch because it's literally a village.
There's a church and a post office, and there's a small village pub. And I think a country mindset is kind of like we've come up from London, maybe a little bit dubious, skeptical, but equally very respectful, and kind of you get on with it, and a lot of interest. So very early on, there's a small kind of village fete that happens every year, and for the past 3 years, we've rocked up with a couple of kegs, said hello, shown our plans. We even booked out the village hall and did a little hello, this is us. Then when we opened, our first open day was just for the village to sort of show each other around. Word got out, and the other 3 villages over rocked up. So we had like treble the amount of people, and we didn't have enough tea and cake for everyone. But I think there's huge interest in a slight, curious way. And I think they're just leaving us to it, and we'll see what happens.
How long did it take you to find the location?
6 months of actually finding it, because the state that we partnered with actually showed us about 2 or 3 places. And the one we're currently in, when I saw it, was like no way in hell, because it had so much work that needed to be done to it.
What type of work did it need?
Didn't have power, didn't have any water source, didn't have any effluent where you could get rid of the water.
There was even bats roosting in this derelict barn, and we'd have to overcome 7 different planning bodies to get the right code, to get the permits to build there, and we'd have to go to great lengths to put in all sorts of things to make it transform into a functioning brewery.
What's the building and the grounds like?
So Abbey Farm is right next to West Acre Priory. The Priory building is probably a 16th century barn that had been repurposed from a 12th century priory. There's a 31-mile stretch called the Nar Valley Way that runs along a river line. It's a chalk river, and there were probably 5 Augustine priories. So we're talking like 10th, 11th, 12th century that would have existed along that line. And I think Henry VIII, probably with the abolition of monasteries, took a few out. But right over the river from where our barn is, you can see the ruins of the priory. So where we are at West Acre Priory is pretty much a piece of history in itself. I think there's 134 scheduled monuments in the UK that are deemed of historic and cultural importance.
Just for comparison, for people in the States, for something they know, it's basically the same scheduling as Stonehenge.
The building has a grade 2 star listing. The land around us it's called an SSI, which is an area of special scientific interest, because it's very, not agriculturally, but like...
It's a combination of both nature and protected species, plus the fact of that old priory and the grounds being so old, 9th sort of century.
Yeah, so we're a scheduled monument, and there's a lot of code that we have to overcome to place a brewery in there. But actually, the planning council that we had to work with to get all the permissions felt like in its time it probably would have made beer historically. It was derelict, it was about to fall by the wayside and fall to ruin. And even though there was a lot to navigate, they would rather it become in use again than not. So actually we found that even though it took probably about 6 months to get the initial planning, and then the full design process was like another 18 months, everyone was really supportive. We actually got a government grant to diversify the farm and to bring employment to a rural area. So it was a big marathon to get here, but one that I think everyone wanted.
What does it take just to get allowed to touch a site like that?
The rest of this in here will be just...
You need to submit what you would like to do, and then all of the bodies that it relates to have to have their say to make sure that you're doing it in a correct and respectful way. So we had 17, I think, different planning conditions that we had to meet, and they covered everything from how much traffic we would be bringing into the area. We actually had to extend a portion of the roads in the village because we were bringing in new traffic, to how we deal with our waste, to how much noise, odor, and impact we have on that community, down to agriculturally anything that we wanted to put in the ground. So any of our drainage, anything needed permits. And then there was also a natural element, because the barn that we were trying to go into had been inhabited by certain rare species. We had to do assessments of how many bats and owls may be roosting or mating or hibernating in our site, and make provisions for them.
It's crazy. Now with the building itself, because it's grade 2 listed, you can't just go in and do whatever you want to it.
So if it's a historic building, every single brick, every single beam, every single foundation is protected. So you must not tamper with anything. The barn had been used as a grain store for a few decades. So there was a high catwalk in the king trusses overhead, where they used to haul up the grain to dry it out. So even though that was a ramshack and it was falling down, we had to rebuild all of that. We couldn't drill through the walls to bring in our gas, power, water. Everything was a workaround.
And then because of the archaeology and the ecology, you had problems with the drainage and sewer, right?
We didn't have the privilege of going into mains drainage because there was not enough drainage capacity in the village we're joining. And then because of archaeological reasons, we could not build a big pool to create a reed bed or a soakaway. So we had to look for new technology to look after our effluent.
And what did you find?
So we use a technology called a membrane bioreactor. Sounds a lot more fancy than it actually is, but actually a lot of wastewater treatment plants in cities and stuff have now instituted this sort of technology, just on a larger scale, obviously.
How does that work?
So it just consists of 3 tanks. Broad overview is the first tank it goes into is for settling in case there's any op-trub, stuff like that. And that's also where it gets pH adjusted to get it back to what level the water incoming is. Then it moves over to a much bigger tank that is operating sort of like a stomach. It's basically an enzyme heavy thing that breaks down organic material, chemical, while recirculating it. And then when it's ready, it discharges through these membranes, which are ultrafiltration. So if there's any particulate left over, it literally pulls them through that. And then it's pretty much at that point, what they would institute is gray water. So it could be used for irrigation. We could go one step further and make it damn near drinkable, but that would be like a UV treating, chemical and UV treating, which is what a wastewater plant that was going to pump water back to houses, that's what they would do. So yeah, there's basically no such thing as water waste. Water can always be brought back to being potable water. And you'll see probably a lot more businesses, breweries in particular, that will have to face that issue over the next 10, 15 years, especially in places like California.
It's a real blessing in a way, because a lot of breweries, I think, just think it becomes a municipal issue and someone else is going to take it away for you. And when you look at a brewery, it produces 9 litres of water for every litre produced. And it's a really important consideration that maybe we should all think about a bit more.
Agreed. Earlier you mentioned that there was no water coming in either. So did you have to drill a well?
No, there was already an existing borehole. We just had to connect to it, which kind of brings us to the front side of water coming in. It's really pure, clean water here, but unfortunately extremely hard.
The ground drains really well here. There's a lot of flint, a lot of chalk. It makes for really nice growing soil, but the water here is extremely hard. And so to brew with it, it needs to be cleaned.
You need to filter it?
Yeah. So we partnered with another company called Voltaia who do a thing called Passivated Deionization. The old method, or not old necessarily, a lot of breweries use reverse osmosis. They use a lot of power, just pushing water through filters at very high pressure. Unfortunately, it strips it down to absolutely zero. So then you have a lot of waste of that water. Say 100% you're putting through, you're only getting about 60% of it back, and the other 40% goes to waste. In brewing, you don't want to strip out all of that stuff. So often you then have to add it back in the brew house, different calciums and gypsum and stuff like that. The Voltaia allows us to dial it down to where we need it to be, but waste less, and it uses less power. The easiest way to understand it, it works like a magnet. All of your ions in water are either positive or negative charged. So if you push it through these little membranes that are either positively or negatively charged, you're basically pulling them out through an electric current. When the electric current stops, it just drops them all out, and then it does a backflush. So that way, your water is pure coming out the other end. You're using less energy because you're not forcing it with pumps. It's just literally going through an electric conductivity field. So you waste less water as well. It ends up being more efficient cost-wise and more beneficial in the waste.
I guess I could describe you guys as sadists, because building a brewery on its own is a huge undertaking. And with Duration, you've mixed in restoring a historic building and all these ecological issues.
Mm-hmm.
How were you able to come up with the funds? Because just the brewery on its own is expensive. But with all these other things added, it must have been exorbitantly expensive.
To get this building up and running was going to take an act of God. We sold our house, and that was a way that we could have leverage in the game. And then we also approached local business people and said to them, this is our idea. It might sound crazy, but if you are in it for the long game, as we are, it might just work. There's this beautiful building, and there's this really talented brewer. All we need is this much money to make it happen. Those people were interested because they're from the area, and they thought this is crazy enough that it might work. There was also a local government grant that was to support basically agricultural areas with bringing employment, new industry to the area. So we were awarded that grant, and it's pretty big. It was maybe 15% of our overall budget. And then they also awarded it to the area where we were coming. So the farm that we're joining got an award, and we got an award as the tenant. How we were actually able to get bank funding when we didn't exist as an entity was that we collaborated. Bates is a brewer that knows a lot of other brewers. So we talked to all of our friends and we said, hey, we want to do this crazy thing. Do you want to support us and make a beer with us? So we were nomadic brewers for, maybe 2 years. And then a couple of our brewing friends over at Amundsen and Cloudwater said, if you want to just put out your own beers, you could use a little bit of our capacity. So we were hugely supported by the brewing industry, both in the UK and even in the US. We did a couple of collabs with Zilcoa down in North Carolina and with Birds Fly South just over in South Carolina. So I think that coming into the game as someone with a clear vision and a good idea, and people were supporting us, it made people kind of get behind the idea and believe in it a little bit. So then when we went to the banks, we said, right, we've got some investors, we've got some of our own capital, we've been given this grant, we've got all the planning permissions in place. And hey, look, we've done like 15 beers. And if you add all of those up and you had put them in our bank account, we would have made this much money. But we've done it collectively with our friends. And the banks were like, oh, you seem to know what you're doing. Plus, they were lending against equipment. So we're paying that off at the moment.
And speaking of equipment, you turned to Germany to get your brew house. What did you wind up getting?
I knew I wanted to have high level equipment. Reached out to about 5 or 6 different brewery manufacturers, 3 of them being in Germany, because Germans make best brewing equipment. Other people might argue that, but they've been doing it for a while. So we've got a Braucon 3-vessel, 20 hectoliter system that I kind of customized and stuff, working with them. They were the most receptive, and any idea that I had, even though it wasn't spec, just roll off the line, sort of how they bash it out. They'd be like, "Yep, no problem, we can do that." Just made a really good relationship with them. They actually even came over and visited us twice.
And then we went out to Bavaria while the kit was in production. They were great, weren't they? We spent about 26 weeks on the design process. And then they came over and it was about a 7-week installation. So we spent 44 weeks doing up this whole building with permission to drill 4 tiny holes in a 2-foot wide wall that was, 800 years old or whatever it is. And then these Germans came over and just plugged it all in, hooked it all up, and then got us brewing. They were pretty amazing.
Seems like you've built for the future.
We basically came into it with the mentality of don't want to scrap together and then hit year 3 or 4 and be popular, and suddenly we can't make enough, or equipment's faltering, or we have to move sites because we're outgrowing this space.
Yeah.
So we just basically came in at the beginning as other people would have been facing in their business at year 4 or 5.
We'd seen a lot of our friends set up almost in a homebrew to business sense, reach a certain size and then head scratch and be like, what's next? So because of that, we were able to say, well, if we're coming into it, what should we be doing differently? And everyone gave us advice and talked to us and said, get the biggest land space that you can, and then go for the equipment in a way where you're not putting it in for now, you're putting it in for where you want to be in 3 years.
From the time you guys started construction until completion, how long did the entire build take?
We hit the button on the build project end of October 2018, and it took a year.
And when did the physical building open?
We brewed our first beer on the 23rd of October 2019, and then we released our first trio with like a 50-venue national launch the day of the general election, actually. So it was 12th of December 2019.
Why don't you walk me through the brewery itself?
So our brew house comprises of 3 buildings. We have a big stone barn where we have our main brew house, so a 3-vessel, 20 hectoliter kit, and a cellar that has 100 hectoliter capacity. The other half of that stone barn is our warehouse and packaging area.
Canning lines in the big stone barn as well, just next door to the brew house.
And then adjacent to that stone barn is, 125 square meters.
Yeah, it's probably about 1,200 square foot sort of thing for cool ship, fooders, barrels.
It's an old cart shed.
It's not as protected, so luckily there was a little more we could do to it. And doing
that building's only like 150 years old, so we could pretty much pull it down and rebuild it as long as we rebuilt it in the same style and preserve the very old parts of it. So we reuse the trusses, and then there's a portion of that stone barn that we haven't renovated yet, that will probably hopefully become a retail area. So we have that earmarked for a tap room. And then in front of both of the stone barn and the wood division, we also have another very, very low structure kind of barn that houses our water treatment plant.
It's just basically all of the guts of the brew house. So it's the incoming water, the outgoing water, power supply, all that. Just think of an English wooden slat barn. So it's nothing sort of fancy with it, but we do only have half of it right now. So we could take the other half and that could become more barrel storage.
Yeah, on our property demise, we're only occupying maybe 2/3 of the space in those. So there is a little room to expand.
What type of beers have you guys been producing in this first stage?
Well, that's the thing is a lot of the stuff I want to make is going to take months, even years, and blending and cool shipping and doing all that sort of stuff. So during that interim, you obviously have to pay your bills. So we typically have sort of hoppy numbers, but I'm nothing against them. I just don't make typically like New England style IPAs. We're a bit more of the classic West Coast IPAs, or I don't know, even more the classic New England IPAs.
We've been doing a lot of pales,
And
a
then
few Belgian styles.
Yeah, pepper and Belgian stuff to kind of get people interested in it. But
and Pilsners. We've been doing.
Yeah, because
like
the equipment. Yeah, the equipment is obviously made to make lagers, and I'm a big fan of Pilsners and lagers. So we always typically have one of those on the go. And then we have a sort of Belgian farmhouse, which is slight mix firm. It's dry hop, but it's dry hop with things like Tettnang, Mandarina Bavaria, and Hallertau. Kind of a little bit more along the lines of my take on a Durank or Terrace Bulba sort of thing. Crisp, clean, bitter, a little bit of that Belgian esters to it. Dry hop with noble hops.
I think we're taking an approach where our fresh beers open, and then it's a kind of lead people our way while we're building up our other stocks.
The differentiation in that is, of course, everybody makes an IPA, a pale. I'm just trying to show here's what you can do with if you actually take the time to research and work on your water profile before it comes in. If you work on different dry hopping techniques, different yeast. I want my IPA or pale to be a definitive stamp of this isn't just another, it's my thoughts and time and what we've tried to make it. I wouldn't say it's a new style, it's just a lot more consideration into it than just I'm going to make an IPA and I'm going to slam 20 grams a liter of dry hops in it. I want you to have that beer, and when you finish it, think like, yeah, I'd like another, I'd like 3 more of those.
Cool. What is the, ethos of Duration? What's it all about?
I would say Duration is beers that belong. Fresh beers and wild ales made from nature with purpose. I want to make good beer with good people, so connected and in a way that's respectful of where we are. I feel like we've tried to build something that is going to be sustainable, it's going to be efficient, and it's going to resonate with where it is, and it hopefully is going to produce something that gives something different, and that's going to be good.
For me, it's, I suppose the one thing I've always wanted to die with is legacy sort of thing. Not material stuff, not money. I've never seen a hearse with a luggage rack on it. Can't take it with you. So I'd rather it be something that long after I'm gone, if we pass it down to a daughter or we pass it down to employees or something like that, like I'd love for the fact that it was 150 years old, 200 years old, sort of thing.
What if it just made its mark and then it went?
Yeah, I'm fine with that too, because that's one question that we always had with, like, if you're doing this big of a project, what's your exit strategy? You're going to sell to somebody or something. And I was just of the mindset of, like, if we do it for 25 years, it was a good run, you just close.
Yeah.
That's it.
But also, if you reach a sweet spot, why want more?
Definitely have a thumbtack into as big as we want to get. Because at that point, I would have become bored if all we did was just exponentially grow to sell more beer, to make it cheaper to sell more beer. At that point, if we reach that thumbtack that we have, I'd actually start thinking more laterally, or probably before that, start thinking more laterally, like start growing vines here to where we can start doing spontaneous wines.
Isn't that the definition of like an artist versus a businessman?
I mean, I reckon, but I would just keep doing things that interest me, but then tie back to it rather than, just year on growth.
So you're in it to make a mark and for the creativity.
Yeah, I mean, but at the end, I still realize it is a business.
Mm-hmm.
That's the other aspect of it, is by putting that thumbtack of where we're going to get to, what I'd rather do is have 25 employees that I pay really well, that have a great working condition, and they're with us for 15, 20 years, rather than just burning through employees.
Time for a current event question. Your physical brewery just opened a few months ago, and Duration itself is relatively new. How is the coronavirus affecting you guys as a company?
This has turned our business on its head, like no doubt about it. On the 16th of March, 85% of our orders cancelled. We were entirely wholesale driven via distro. We worked with regional distributors all around the country, and everyone cancelled. It was kind of good in a way, because it all just happened very quick. So that was it. So we had to change really, really quickly. We have, we had 3 people working for us, and we took on a new hire like the week that we realized Corona was going to hit. That had been in pipes anyway, but she's come on board and she was supposed to be doing sales admin and finance admin, and she's actually learned the warehouse and been doing pick and pack for us. Think of logistics, we're very rural. We don't have a local customer base really to speak of yet. We were doing monthly pickups where we'd, open the doors for a few hours, and that was good monthly, but not huge demand. So yeah, we had to turn everything upside down and suddenly get on the phone, speak to all of, we were giving brand support already, but speak to all of those people that we'd had events with and customers and say, do you want to come direct? And we can get you beer. And then we had to go through the logistical challenge of how do you ship beer in a lockdown situation when you don't have your normal freight network. So we were working with couriers.
What was your initial reaction to the country being shut down?
We stopped our production for 3 weeks. And with hindsight, we probably shouldn't have done that. But at the time, we had no idea how much we'd need to conserve. So we rang the banks, we deferred our rent. We looked at who in the team we'd really need to keep on. We've not actually put anyone on unemployment, and we're too small to really do that. We've made decisions as they've come the best we can, and I think that's all we're going to continue to do.
Right now, we're selling like gangbusters pretty much as fast as we can make it. It's gone. But, if this drags on 2 months, 3 months, people might start pinching pennies. So we'll have to adjust again. I mean, it's just like everybody else. There's no playbook for it. We don't know what 2 weeks is going to lead to. Luckily, we built the business and built the business model to where it can be flexible.
We're just trying to roll with the punches and go with it. And adaptation is, it's another crossroads. We've been at crossroads for 3 years.
If all things had remained the same, what was the next phase of duration?
Well, it's still the same phase. We're just about to purchase 3 new tanks, including 1 tank, or like I say, put over in the mixed term barn so we can package those feeder beers and stuff like that. And then a bottling line to package those for re-fermentation.
I'd say the one thing that's probably got delayed is we were planning to open a very modest tap room and start offering tours. So we have instead done a few online tours and a meet the founder kind of tasting via our online shop.
And with these virtual tours, you actually sell tickets and send beer out to the people attending, right?
So we have like a tour ticket. So you can come in and see the brewery. We'll give you a tour around virtually, and then we'll sit down together and we will have already shipped the beer to your door, and then we'll talk you through what was the concept behind that beer and have a smell and have a taste and just do some Q&A. There's a lot more content now because everyone's at home. And I think the thing about content is having something to say. So we were planning to bring people to say, we made this thing and look, it's beautiful, and come and look at it. So we still want to do that, and we're just using technology to do it. I think it's a nice offering because it takes you out of your day-to-day and it takes you somewhere different, and it is pretty special.
I also saw that you're participating in the Buy the NHS a Pint campaign. What's that all about?
We've got together with 9 other breweries. Gypsy Hill in London started it, and then they saw like it'd be a lot better if they asked friends in the industry to join in with it.
So besides Duration and Gypsy Hill, there's also Fine Ales, Wylam, Cloudwater, North, Verdant, Left-Handed Giant, Dea, Unity, Boundary, and Buxton all taking part. The campaign is basically a way for you guys to say thanks to the people who are doing a really difficult job at the UK's National Health Service.
Yeah, it's kind of like a pay a pint forward scheme. There's a huge proportion of the country just doing extraordinary work. And as an industry, we kind of feel a little helpless, like we'd like to support them, but we don't have PPE and we don't have access to raw ingredients. So it's a way that we can ask our supporters to contribute. And this creates a fund. As brewers, we can turn that fund into a bar tab and we can flush it through our supply chain and regenerate our industry. But we're basically asking our customers, if you want to put a pint in the hands of people that are doing incredible work at the moment in the future, when our industry can come back and be hospitable and raise a glass, then you can pledge money and then we pay it forward.
What a great project. Now you guys are parents. I saw your daughter pop her head out a little while ago. So what's it like for her to be around while mom and dad are building a brewery? And I guess being around the beer community too.
She's just grown up in and around breweries. And so I think it introduces her to a world of beautiful people. I think the people that work in the type of breweries and the industry that we're in are very inclusive, and it's a very family orientated. I feel like she's seen her parents work with a lot of dedication. She's seen a lot of tears. She's seen a lot of striving. And I feel that would be good for her. She loves giving out the merch, and she wants to design some of the cans. But she just sees it as two parents that are dedicated to what they do.
Beer often gets a real bad reputation of being white guys, flannel, and beard. But at the same time, we're not kind of on that tip. If you scratch under the surface of beer, there's loads of people of different ethnicities, colors, trans. And so we've kind of built it up here as, like, jokingly, a lot of brewery friends or people in the industry say it's like the duration retreat. So it's almost up until this happened, almost every weekend we had different people that either wrote about beer or worked in breweries or friends of all that stuff that come through here.
But beer gets it's a family anyway, so why can't it literally be a family? Like people see it as a fraternity, sorority, network, tribe. It's hospitality, and if you want to go really crazy, the traveller or the pilgrim used to go on the road, and along that road pubs popped up, and then pubs became the place for libation and respite and, you know, to lay your head for a night. So that's hospitality in essence. Like, it's like a modern church, isn't it? So I feel like beer's got a very magnetic draw to how we connect as people and how we see common ground, and that's family. Like that is family. So I feel like as family brewers, we're just doing what's natural to us. There's no need to dress that up. It's just who we are.
Yeah, and we'd like to let that trickle down into the company. From like day one, part of our business plan was setting aside a bit of the company that long-term employees can get a benefit and like be part of and have ownership of the company. And then on top of that, like, we want to offer paternity leave, maternity leave, things that we don't have to do, but, you know, it's very important.
It's beer in a better way, which sounds so corny, but if you could build your perfect vision, why not be a total visionary, even if it makes you a bit naive, more hurdles to overcome? Like, if that's what you believe, you should do it. So we're gonna try and do it.
Sounds great. I wish you both the best of luck on this. Is there anything you'd like to add?
I mean, if ever anyone is over this way, we'd love you to come see a little slice of what we've made over here. It's pretty simple. It's just beer from a farm basis, and yeah, pull up a chair, come say hello, and come check out what it's about.
Miranda Bates, thanks for spending all this time with me this afternoon. Have a great day.
It's been great speaking with you. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll see you on the other side, I guess.
Yeah. Hang in. It's going to get better.
I hope so. See you guys soon. If you'd like to learn more about Duration Brewing or Bates and Miranda's excellent adventure, check out their website. And while you're there, you can sign up for a virtual tour or help them buy the NHS a pint. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.